The results are in. The service engine light is off. And I passed smog. Oh, happy day. After months of trials and tribulations, repairing my BMW. Take a look. Since you're watching this video, you already know my answer to this question. Before I purchased the car, I searched online and found a video posted by a mechanic who tore down the BMW engine, which had a problem similar to what was described. I also consulted with the mechanic who made the diagnostic. Who are you guys? Now tell me your names.
No. Johnny, this is Jimmy.
Johnny and Jimmy.
Even though we have a different name tag.
Okay.
Okay.
This is the kind of place that Palo Alto Bimmer is. Yeah. But he's giving me some advice on my car that he's telling me I shouldn't buy it, or I shouldn't attempt to fix it because the head's blown. And I've seen YouTube. Exactly. I've seen YouTube and they do suggest online, right? Get a low mileage replacement engine. You know, that's the best way to fix it, right?
It's going to be difficult to find a low mileage engine on that model because most of them right now
2001, right? Yeah, a lot of miles on them, right? Yeah. So I'm in for an adventure, but I won't come back. I'll just say, you know.
You can come back. The best case. Or to pinpoint exactly, you would have to take that cylinder head off.
I'm here with the owner of this, soon-to-be ex-owner of this beauty of historic automotive technology here. I'm taking it away. Nostalgia right That's there. Justin. The car is a California native, and it's in very good shape. For a over 20-year-old car, it still has a lot of life left. This is my ode to ICE. Internal combustion. I'm just getting around to taking the intake manifold out. But here you see the dual cams. When you work on an engine, let's just say you're intimate with the fluids that are in the engine. You can see here discoloration. The smell is another part of the experience. I finally wrestled with the intake manifold and removed it. These are tools that I purchased for the project. This is a special tool. Here's another tool I've purchased thus far. It's for removing the fan. It's pretty hard to get in and around this engine. Online resources help quite a bit in this process. I've consulted YouTube, other websites, and there are many people who are rebuilding this sort of engine, and I'm glad they are. The underside of the engine where activity has happened in order to move things like the air conditioning unit. I've had to move that away to allow myself access up into the exhaust manifold. But the exhaust manifold has been a challenge up to this point. What's made it a little easier, again, are the online resources giving you encouragement that this is a process that can be done. I finally removed the head from the engine, and unfortunately my dream of restoring this engine has been shattered. I'll give you a little closer look. The third from the rear cylinder has suffered a catastrophic failure. This, as you can see, it has a burn spot at the top, and the piston is actually melted. I see something happened with the coolant that caused an explosion. That suggests something was wrong with the cooling system. 97 degrees, which, because it's a German car, means Celsius. I've submerged the original thermostat in boiling water for a few minutes. So now I want to see if that has moved the thermostat open. And while it looks closed, there may be an open, but it may be too small to see at that. So what I will do is take a light and shine it in here. And I'm not seeing any light getting through any of the cracks. So that tells me that the thermostat is stuck. This is the second or third time I've done this. So there is nothing going on with this thermostat. This is the radiator removed from the car with the expansion tank, the mounting plate, water pump, and thermostat. The water pump is driven by a pulley attached here in the direction that draws water into the center and forces it to the outside, which causes the pressure in the system. There's a white residue on the side of the radiator, and when I removed the parts, I noticed it was inside the cooling system as well. When I removed the expansion tank, I discovered there's a split on the expansion tank. This is actually coming from the split. The split is an indication that there was a high pressure in the system, as would be expected if there was a failure in the thermostat. The system would have recirculated very hot water through the expansion tank. You can see some damage. The hole is where the warming coolant enters the expansion tank thermostat area. When the engine thermostat is closed, no coolant flows through the outlet of the radiator here. And so it is all forced back through the return pipe. And instead of through the radiator, it goes through this small outlet, which then circulates through the expansion tank. If the heater is on, the warming coolant also discharges here through the heater core, creating heat inside the car. If the heater is off, the only outlet for the water is through this circuit, returning to the water pump through a small hose here. What happens after a while is pressure and temperature build up in the system, and that's what causes a catastrophic failure. Here are the failed expansion tank thermostat and a replacement unit from BMW. When the engine is warming, coolant flows from the expansion tank through the top into the heat exchanger for the automatic transmission fluid. This serves to warm the fluid from the cold. When this unit reaches operating temperature, the coolant instead flows from the bottom of the radiator. These are interesting devices called wax motors, which turn thermal energy into linear mechanical energy based on the expansion properties of the wax included. The top part of the thermostat is open when the engine is warming, thus allowing the coolant, which is warming, to come through this circuit. However, once the coolant reaches the operating temperature, this is pushing up as this pushes up. Thus, that opens the lower circuit, which comes from the bottom of the radiator into the heat exchanger. Its only function is to cool or warm the transmission fluid. This piece is simply a T that allows the heat exchanger, coolant, or the expansion tank coolant to flow back through the circuit into the engine. Here is the head, and you may wonder what happened. The cylinder which suffered damage has this gunk which is impeding or would impede the flow of water. Absolutely necessary to keep the cylinder cool. So what happened was, and you can see it's actually close to where the overheating happened. Makes a lot of sense. I don't even know what this gunk is. Let's just go in and take a look at it. Is there some connection with the location of these deposits and the oil ports? We'll see more of this gunk in the expansion tank. I'm replacing the expansion tank and radiator in my rebuild, so let's have some fun and open these two up just to see what they look like on the inside. I cut around the edge with a hacksaw and pulled it apart. In doing so, this portion of the expansion tank broke, so you could consider that these two ports would be sealed. Looking down into the expansion tank, there is a lot of crud and internal damage. This is the second stage of my expansion tank dissection. The bulk of the gunk inside the tank is a gelatinous, oily mess. This appears to be some long-standing issue that may have been the result of a bad head gasket leaking oil into the coolant over time. Let's take a look at where we stand. This leads to this leading to this. Looking through here, that is a mess. Level indicator for the coolant. Let's take a look at what we have here. Not sure what this does. It is affixed to the bottom. This pulls out, and that seems to be related to the transmission fluid cooler. There is a lot of gunk in this expansion tank that obviously caused circulation problems with the coolant. The final cuts of the expansion tank have gotten quite messy. This fell out. I'm not sure where that goes. This is the coolant level sensor, which inserts here. On the inside, you can see this device, which determines the level of the coolant. That's above my pay grade. The coolant enters here. This is where the coolant enters the expansion tank thermostat, and that is where the transmission heat exchanger receives its coolant. You can see a hole here. This is some sort of device which apparently goes into the hole. And finally, the outlet to the heater core. You can see that there is a path for the coolant. There's a hole here, not sure, maybe that's for venting, and the bypass hose to the engine is here. Taking a grinder along this edge and the top and bottom, I was able to then lift up these tabs with a screwdriver. Okay, very much destroyed now. So let's take a look inside. There are some deposits, like those found in the expansion tank, showing up here as well. And as I expected, there's a block here that prevents the coolant coming into the radiator from going through to the transmission fluid heat exchanger. So what that means is the coolant needs to go through the radiator and come back in order to be fed into the heat exchanger. This is ICE, internal combustion engine. This is the type of device required to turn air and fuel into rotational energy that drives your car. To move a 400 to 500 pound engine requires mechanical assistance. In this case, a 1-ton shop crane. I currently have it set at the 1/4 ton setting, which is 500 pounds. Infinity Salvage in East Palo Alto gave me the advice I needed. He told me there were only 2 years of engine that could replace the engine in my 2001 E46. I was able to find an engine with the help of Mike, as he had access to an inter-salvage network where other salvage yards would place their items for sale. And this turned out to be the ticket. So if you're looking for an engine, you won't find it on Craigslist or Facebook. You need to go to the professionals at the auto dismantlers, and they are professionals. They're taking our cars, and in this case ICE cars, internal combustion cars, taking the fluids out, recycling them responsibly, and I give them credit for all they do for the environment. But if you save one of these, you also help the environment. The car had 146,000 miles on it, which suggests that this engine is at the edge of serviceability, and I'm counting on that in order to do the few things that extend its life. Knowing that a stuck thermostat is a potential engine killer. I'm testing the thermostat in the replacement engine in the same way as I tested the original thermostat. I think I can quickly show you the light that comes in. And as you look, you can see the light is coming through the crack into the interior, which means it is opening at boiling temperatures. If I leave this to cool, you can see the light goes out. On the engine, I replaced the head gasket, coolant pipes, water pump, intake boot, and filters. On the car, I replaced the radiator, expansion tank with thermostat, and the mass airflow sensor. The plastic pieces are wearing away at the edge. So this is the new piece versus the old piece, and you can see that is the last stand of material, that O-ring. So this is what will happen to the plastic at those critical junctures. You can see most of the connection is still in the block, because when I attempted to nudge this out, that left that entire plug of plastic. This is the inlet to the water pump, cleaned and prepped, ready for the new pipe to be installed. This is the surface of the block after I prepared it using a 3M Scotch-Brite pad. The pad can be used as hard as you want. After cleaning it, I have a suitable surface for the head gasket. This is the head before I start cleaning. Contrast that with this. It's that rubber plug, and that is the key to getting at the bolts on the torque converter. That will allow me to take the bolts out and leave the torque converter installed in the transmission. Here's the engine compartment with the engine removed. The torque converter bolts to the plate on the engine at those 3 mount points. What allows me to remove the engine without removing the transmission is the fact that I can access the bolts from an access port that I showed earlier. The transmission is supported by a wood block at the particular angle needed to remove the engine, because the pan will sit up on this crossbar when you're trying to move it, and you need to move it out in order to get to the bolt heads, which are behind here. So when this is fully retracted and in its operating position, there's no clearance here. So you need to remove the bolts from the mount underneath and supporting the transmission so it doesn't fall on the ground. I created this stand out of 3/4 inch plywood and 2x4 so that the transmission would be supported after I removed the bolts for the mount. I was able to access 4 bolts from underneath the vehicle, and I had to lift and move the engine in order to get to these final 3. Actually, there were 2 more, which is the starter. So in all there are 1, 2, 3, 4, in all there are 5 bolts you need to get from the top of the car which requires moving the engine up and out. For the case of any driveway mechanic doing an engine swap on this model, swapping a dismantled engine means it will be rebuilt. Most engines are high mileage engines that haven't succumbed to cooling problems. They are on the edge. Dropping the block into the engine compartment is the only way to install the engine with a shop hoist. It takes a little creativity, but you can do it. It's December 20th. I'm rocking my coverall, and it's been a long, strange trip to get to this point in the repair. Still have issues with the BMW. I have 2 misfires in cylinders 1 and cylinder 4. I've changed the mass airflow sensor, thinking that was going to repair the issue. Seemed to, but then the codes came back just as I was about to get it smogged. I was driving, and then that dreaded service engine soon light came on. So what I'm going to do is work on the injectors. So here is the injector unit that I'm going to install. I've removed the vanity cover. I've just about gotten it to the point where I can take this other injector bar out. In the rebuild, I used the intake manifold from the original engine because it had replacement plastic pipes installed and fewer miles. However, it was a year older than the replacement engine, and you now know how it overheated. The original fuel injectors were in the manifold. I removed the hose from that little plastic clip, and that allows the hose to be pulled up just enough that I can see it. Mission accomplished. I was able to remove this from the hose. This blue connector has to be pushed down in order for the clip to release, and it required me spinning it a little bit and really finding that zone where it pushes in, and also simultaneously pulling on this, pulling it out. Okay, it's a tale of 2 injector bars. I'm going to get close. The one on the right is the one I just removed. There is a little bit of deposit on these injectors. Maybe that means they've been run hard. That may be why I'm getting the number 1 and number 4 misfire. So let's go ahead, put the new old one in, and reset the codes and see if I'm going to be smogging this anytime soon. Thanks for watching. A final lesson. If your car calls for premium, use it.